Praise the Lord, saints. This is Elder Adrian Heyman. I have to apologize for, because I'm doing a lot of apologies nowadays, but I wanted to make it out to church yesterday, but now I'm realizing after all this time that essentially if my wife's okay, then we're okay. If my wife's not okay, then I have to stay. Didn't mean to rhyme, but that's really much how it is. Just keep praying for me. Keep praying for my sister. And I know God's taking care of everything. I know He is. I wanted to say something about a particular sign of our times that in many circumstances it goes unsaid. But the more I look at it, the more it seems to go right up with Scripture. If you've noticed, maybe most of you have not, but some have, the disparity in wealth between those of lowest class and those that are highest class has never been greater. Of course, you know those that are lowest, even if you live in the richest country in the world, which is what the United States purports to be, you see people living under a freeway, living out of their mobile homes or motorhomes, living, and I'm looking at even, I may say, well, Orange County should be pretty, pretty affluent area. And in many places it is. What they do is that they chase those who are less fortunate out of the real affluent areas to those that are kind of less affluent. So you may not see them in neighborhoods like Laguna Niguel, Coto de Casa, Villa Park, Yorba Linda. But you'll see them in Santa Ana, some places in Orange, maybe some places in Anaheim, and every so often along the Santa Ana River. But at the same time, no one has ever been as rich as they are now. You got people that they can gain $5 billion in one day. They can lose $2 billion the next. And it doesn't really faze them that much. Think about it. $1 billion. Billion. I'm talking about million. I'm talking about $1 billion. I remember if you had done that during the Great Depression, you would be the leading candidate for jumping out a window. Because how could you lose $1 billion? Oh my Lord, oh my goodness. Nowadays, it's part of business. But it's not just the fact that you have that much to blow, that you put it in front of everybody. And how is this supposed to be a sign that the Lord's coming? If you read about the seals, and I'll be dealing with that in my ongoing study of Revelation that I would do periodically. But that particular area of the seals, it's the I believe it's the third seal. It's the third seal. It's talking about how it says a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny. And people will say, well, that's a penny. It's just a penny, but we can't read it like we know what a penny means now. But we have to understand what a penny meant. Number one, during the days that John wrote Revelation, and number two, during the days that it was translated from or to the King James Version. And the penny was the word for denarius. And denarius was essentially equated to a full day's work for a particular worker or whatever it happens to be. This is what you give someone to take home. And is it a measure of wheat? That's pretty much the amount that the man could eat. Not saying his family, not saying his wife, not saying his children, or anyone else that he has to support, but just what he can eat. So, okay, fine. Can't eat wheat. It says 3 measures of barley. Okay, so me, my wife, and my child can eat. But see, in those days, also, you didn't have just one child. Because if you had one child, that was one sure way of not having your name to be continued through generations. Mainly because in those days, a lot of kids died in either childbirth or when they were very young. So you had large families. 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever families. And the more the better, but you can only feed so much. So what this is looking at is extreme famine. Because if you only have enough to buy, at the very most, enough for 3 members of your family, this doesn't deal with rent, doesn't deal with transportation. Of course, you just walked everywhere, or you pulled a cart. You couldn't afford oxen or whatever. You just did whatever you could do. But the idea is that it puts you into serious financial restraints. But then the second portion of the verse says, see that you don't hurt the oil or the wine. Now, the oil and the wine is typified what the rich people would get. That essentially they overflow with oil, with wine. They celebrated. They had parties, and now you get the idea. What I'm saying is not just that the rich people have things, but that they flaunt things. And I remember, how could they do so much? Because if we read our history, if you look at the French Revolution, one of the reasons why they had a revolution was because of the deafness of the upper class. That they just didn't hear the complaints. They didn't see the policies that took money from the poor and gave it to the rich. And in fact, I'm not sure if she said this, but she's been so often attributed to saying this particular phrase that it became a calling card for just being completely oblivious to the conditions of the people that you are ruling over. And that woman, you may have guessed, is Marie Antoinette, who essentially, at least purportedly said, let them eat cake. Now, it may not have been her, but it's been attributed to her. So let's go by that. And she said this to cries of, let's say, help or being able to assist those who are in need. And it typified the idea of the rich being able to get away with flaunting their riches in the face of the poor. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why the Communist Party became so powerful in Russia. Because, again, they had rich families that were living and flaunting their wealth in the face of abject poverty. And people got upset. They began a movement, and they ended up essentially rebelling against the czars. And that's why people like Lenin came into power. But that doesn't seem to be happening nowadays. In fact, people almost cheering for these ultra-rich people to become even richer, because maybe I can be that way. Now, they'll never end up being that particular type of wealth. They'll never taste it, but maybe we can do it one day. So we have to have the freedom to be able to get that, and we should applaud those who, because of their minds and because of their abilities, were able to succeed so highly, when a lot of times it's not their abilities. It was their father's wealth, their family wealth, or in many cases, the way they were able to deal with businesses in ways that essentially were not, if they were legal, they weren't very ethical. And so they have these huge, almost super ships, yachts that look like cruise ships. They have not just, and it's funny because I remember when my wife first had her stroke, and we were in Honduras, and they had to fly us to Fort Lauderdale. And it wasn't a regular plane; it was a medevac type plane. But I was thinking medevacs like helicopters and so on. This was like a Learjet, and I was just marveling that one can take these type of jets. They fly as fast, just about as fast as regular passenger jets, but they fit for those who were not that big. I mean, for smaller parties. And it was just amazing how you can go just as fast through the skies. And you also actually have more latitude in where you're going because the jets are smaller. Therefore, you don't need so much of a length of a runway. And so there's more opportunities for you to get to more airports and so on. It just amazed me. Now, I hope I never go on one again, because that means that somebody is sick. and I don't want to be in that position anymore. But it just amazed me how you can do that. And so I can see why people want to buy jets. The rich want to buy jets so they can be able to go whenever they want, wherever they want to go. Believe me, it's not like the Cessnas that you hear about, and these fall out of the sky, and so these are actual jets. But it also is a symbol of just, you can be completely oblivious to the poverty that's around you, because you surround yourself in wealth. Your houses are actual mansions, almost like little towns, whereas you can fit you, and then maybe your children, and maybe those you care. I mean, you had even this whole big thing about Jeffrey Epstein. He bought an island. He bought an island where you don't even have to see anyone who unless they are working for you. And even then, you can go ahead and buy them at least temporary lodging places where they can stay while they're working, and you would never see their poverty, ever. But you would be able to hold huge dinners and participate in all types of lasciviousness and licentiousness and just being parties and just frivolity and decadence. And you wouldn't care because, hey, it's just me having a party. But yet there's people who are living in the exact opposite. You wonder how they can ever get anything to eat. They can't afford to be fat or out of shape because they're skin and bones. If they have enough to eat for their own family, that's about as much as they can even hope for. They can't hope to get any better. They're stuck in their positions. And the only thing they can look at is, at best, an existence of always fighting to get the next meal. And there were times, of course, where you fought and lost and you didn't have a meal. Maybe you don't have 2 or 3 meals. Maybe you miss out on more. And then you know that you've lost the battle because you're about ready to lose your life. This is the type of famine that we're seeing right now. I'm not saying that we're in the days of the third seal, no. When I get to that particular point of Revelation, I'll explain more about it. But we can see how it can lead to those days in Revelation. Because we're well on our way to that particular point as we speak. So the idea here, saints, is not that we look at the signs and say, yeah, Jesus is coming, because everything's happening. No, it's not necessarily that. We do rejoice because the Lord's about to come, but we also, our hearts have to go out. We have to see how the closer we get to the Lord's coming, how our hearts have to ache and mourn and yearn for those who are not able to deal with for them. I mean, I see them, they're begging in front of McDonald's, they're begging, and this is not just going downtown Skid Row. This is in essentially a pretty affluent neighborhood. And they're coming because, and it's not just that they're all doing drugs. They're not all just doing drugs. And sometimes we blame them, oh, they're just lazy. No, they're not all just lazy. I remember seeing one man, and I kept getting upset at myself because in a cashless society, it's even worse for them because no one has money to give to them because they're cashless. Because we do everything by card. So you have to almost remind yourself to get some cash for yourself. And then we do it because of, we want to make sure we're not trapped if something happens. But it's not because we want to we want to give to someone who's looks where you know that they're not doing well for themselves. And say this last bit. So I remember seeing this guy, and he was, of course, wanting people to give him money. And then he stood up and began to walk. And I saw that one leg was huge, and the other leg was so skinny. I told myself, who's going to hire him? Who's going to help him? If there's anyone that needs help, it's this guy. Because I can probably just almost feel that his every step is extremely painful. I can even think of myself having gout, and I do have gout. So sometimes it flares up and it hurts. I got to be careful of my feet because they'll swell up. And how hard it was for me to walk during those flares because my foot had swollen up. And I had to change shoes, and one time I had to have a walking boot. And just think of these people that don't have the health insurance to get this. They don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the means to get treated or anything like that. They have to suffer in that way. I even think of my own wife. That essentially, if she didn't have insurance, she'd be dead. She would be dead. Because what she has, it would be so overwhelming with all of her medicines that we wouldn't be able to afford it. And the rich just get richer. I have nothing against people being rich. I have nothing against people putting their minds to work and be able to design or make things that people want to have, and therefore they are able to ascend into wealth. I don't mind that. If they can do it, so be it. But just know that there will be more people, or there will be not maybe more people, but there will be people who will become super rich. As of now, there are people that are approaching the $500 billion mark in personal wealth. Well, there are others who have practically nothing but a cardboard box, maybe a tent, to shield against all the elements. People look down on them. Think about that as you pray. We know the Lord's coming soon. He has to. Because the inequity in our relative wealth is just about right there. God bless you and take care. In Jesus' name.